Ugh. Hi everyone, Destiny Kistano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Guerilla Toss record, Famously Alive. This is a brand new LP from New York band Guerilla Toss. Everything from no wave to new wave to dance punk to NEO-PSYCH, Guerilla Toss has undergone quite a few artistic evolutions in the short amount of time that I've been aware of their music. Each one getting more interesting and varied as they have transitioned from the very abrasive gay disco back in 2013, I believe, to the colorful psychedelics and danceable grooves of Twisted Crystal, their last record. Now, given the increasingly trippy sounds of their past few LPs, I kind of expected this new one over here to inhabit a psychedelic space too, but I had no idea that we would be digging so deeply into some trippy rabbit hole on this one that the band would essentially be writing what sounds like the national anthem for some kind of weird alien space colony. Like, stylistically, the glistening rushes of synthesizers, the simple but pounding beats, as well as the heavily manipulated vocals on Live Exponential, sound more akin to Animal Collective than really any of the punk or no-wave stuff that may have subtly influenced some of the band's previous works. The Anco influences loom even larger on the tunneled synth layers, as well as squishy beats on the song Pyramid Hum, which is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if the band is putting their own spin on these sounds. But the execution, soundplay, and writing just isn't really quite doing it for me on these tracks. Live Exponential, again, as much as I do like how heavy and overwhelming some of the sounds on this track are, the slow kick and snare patterns on this one, as well as the very one-dimensional structure, get kind of tedious, just very old, very fast. Not to mention that these synthesizers are so bright that it's almost like staring into the sun. The pacing, too, on Pyramid Hum leaves a lot to be desired. The pounding and rockin' rhythms and blaring guitars on Mermaid Airplane, in my opinion, are much better, but I don't really see the appeal in consciously including a lead melody that sounds like it was ripped out of a schoolyard teasing routine. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. I much prefer the overwhelming bliss of the song Wild Fantasy. This track sounds like it's something straight out of a new wave dream, but still brings a very concrete rhythm section with very driving bass and drums. The call and response vocals in the second half are a nice touch too. Then Excitable Girls is a very interesting change of pace. Feels like a dated and very swagger heavy piece of pop rock from the late 80s or the early 90s. Think like We Can't Dance era Genesis, with its booming drums and compressed acoustic guitar licks, but laced with enough trippy vocal effects and alien vocal leads that Guerilla Toss do really bring their own sound to it. The first half of the track is groovy and deafening, and then suddenly busts into this very tense build that doesn't really move into a crescendo at the end as much as it just disappears into what sounds like a jar full of blood breaking. There's something very fragmented and sloshy about it. But yes, it is a very odd sound that just cuts off the entire song. We have another flavor of groovy beats, warped synthesizers, and heavily manipulated vocals on the track I Got Spirit, and stylistically this one feels almost like a combination of post-punk, pop, hyperpop with some psychedelic undertones. And overall, I thought this track was decent while it was on, though many of the zany sound effects I thought distracted from the song at the core of it all. Meanwhile, Happy Me felt like something that could have fit onto the last Guerilla Toss record, while still simultaneously maintaining the lyrical themes of this record, framing happiness in the world this record is existing in as more of a weird disposition as opposed to a natural, organic feeling. Now, the closing track is surprisingly this glistening and hopeful electropop anthem a la Churches, or maybe even like old MGMT, with some subtly subversive production choices that do leave the track feeling a little rough around the edges. But yeah, on this one it feels like Guerilla Toss have transitioned into the sound of this young, bright, hopeful new pop outfit that is going to bring happiness and love to a new generation. And I get this shift as a purposeful move away from Guerilla Toss's usual sound and work that could even be interpreted to a slight degree as a little satire, a little parody, because much of this record does seem to be spent trying to paint a picture for the audience of this futuristic utopia that on the surface is happy, is perfect, is shiny, but on the underside of it, there is something really dark and hollow about the whole thing too. So I do wrestle with this closer a little bit. Am I crazy about the sound and the direction? Not necessarily, but there does seem to be a lot of intent to them going in this direction, and it does add to the commentary of the record overall. I suppose another positive note that I could add is that it starts pretty strong too. We have the groovy Cannibal Capital, with a tight bass line and rhythm pattern setting the stage for a series of eerie lyrical mantras about wealth accumulation and greed, both of them being facets in this emotionally numb and disconnected society. I love the blaring rushes of shrill guitars on this track, as well as just the general feeling that I'm watching an assembly line of brainwashed machine humanoids that populate whatever dystopia this album is about. Probably this one that we're in now. I also think the transition at the end of this track, the smooth transition right into the riffy and driving famously alive is great. The sci-fi synthesizers and anthemic guitar chords are a nice touch. Love the doubled up cleans and screams toward the back end of the track too. Those are pretty invigorating. There are a lot of creative risks on this record that I respect, and a handful of songs that I think are really good too. Not to mention that Guerilla really did try to go the extra mile with a series of songs that do bring a bit of a concept, or at least a coherent macro theme to the table between all these tracks. But also, with that being said, some of my least favorite Guerilla songs of all time end up on this record, and there are some moments that in the midst of trying something new, they haven't fully quite fleshed their ideas out yet or figured out how to kind of make that sound or a certain style play to their strengths. So it just kind of ends up sounding a little too derivative, which is disheartening for a band that usually has a pretty bold sound and style no matter what direction they're going in. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head, it's another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Guerilla forever.